Hello, everyone. Welcome back to this series of ongoing MCU talks. We're now in the middle of phase two. So we just talked about Thor: The Dark World, and now we're getting into Captain America: The Winter Soldier, a movie that doesn't really need a lot of introduction. A lot of people like this one. But Kaitlyn Red Wing, we have been here before on this channel.
We
To
have.
those of you who do not know her, she's someone who works in the entertainment industry for a long time. She's also done a lot of video games work in terms of journalism and conversations, and you can find her on the internet pretty much anywhere. You will find those links at the end of this video. We will get there. Don't want to get ahead of myself, but Kaitlyn, welcome back to the channel.
Thank you so much for having me back on here. I loved talking with you last time. We talked about Spider-Man, and I think it's fitting that I'm back for another Marvel conversation, but this time a film instead of a video game. It's like the best of both worlds. So thank you for inviting me back on.
So Winter Soldier was an interesting one because I was starting to think about this from like a Captain America perspective. When we had First Avenger and the Avengers, there was always this thing about who was a more interesting character, and Captain America wasn't really on that list for a lot of people until this movie. And something changed over here, which I guess I should start off by first thoughts when you watch the movie. Like I assume, like when did you first watch the movie?
While I was like preparing for this talk, which I say that I didn't really do much prep other than rewatch the movie and like take few notes. I didn't realize that this year was its 10-year anniversary that premiered March. Oh, I have it somewhere. It's like March 13th, 2014. And I would have just like, I think it was my first year of college. Oh my God, that makes me feel so old. But like, I know I went and saw that in theaters. I think Iron Man was the only one that I hadn't seen in theaters. And I think I rented that one and was like, whoa, like this is awesome. That was my first experience with the Winter Soldier, was seeing it opening weekend. And I remember just getting like that one was the one that like sucked me into like the Captain America verse. Like I remember liking the the first Avenger, but
Mhm.
was not like fully, I don't know. I was like a casual enjoyer of the films at that point. And this was the one where it felt like, oh, this is something different because
Mhm.
of the way it like pulled in past movies and just like this entire structure of the movie and tonally is different. So,
Mhm.
and it's been my favorite ever since. Like I just the Winter Captain America: The Winter Soldier is has been my favorite MCU film. I think it'll be extremely difficult for any future film to take its place.
It's funny because Winter Soldier is still among my like top five, six movies of the MCU. Like it's still up there, and we were just rewatching it recently. Was pretty great. But I think of the first time I watched the movie because it was kind of a surprising viewing. Like when I went to go see it, like I was sort of on the heels of Iron Man 3, Thor: The Dark World, and it's like you have a certain sense of what to expect at that point from a Marvel movie. This one starts off and it's this espionage thriller with a lot of really dark real world stuff being tackled in here that's especially relating to social political stuff. And I was just sitting with my family as well, and I'm like, this is the same universe as like what we just like watched a few other movies, right? Like, okay. One thing I wanted to pivot into here was that, well, I found something that I had at the time from that movie. And this is funny because I walked out of the movie into a toy store, and I have this figure
Oh,
from the end of the movie, and it's like First Avenger.
oh, I love that. So
And
you got that around the time that this movie came
this
out.
is a
So
10-year
you've
old
had
action
that.
figure.
Wow. That is much more impressive than when you told me you had something to show me. I was like, "Oh, I have something. I don't have anything that's 10 years
Oh,
old."
dude.
What a good
It's
like keepsake to
all
have
right. I'm
from
no
that area.
judgment. No judgment.
Oh, I mean, I so for people who don't know, I now dusting it off. He had told me that he had something. I was like, oh, I have something, and it was the.
Up
I think this
there.
came out of. I think this came out a few years ago, like sometime during the pandemic, and I was like, finally, I have Bucky holding the shield, like with
Yeah.
the mask, Funko Pop. But Yeah, I'm so sorry, Bucky. You have been in storage.
I love that shot, by the way. Like that was another thing in the movie that I remember when it was being advertised. That was the one thing that they kept showing, which is he gets the
Yeah.
shield. I remember because they were like,
Oh,
"How does that happen? Like, how did he catch the shield in like in midair? That's crazy."
see, I wonder how that would go over today, because my like gut instinct was like, that's a moment that I would not show
Hmm.
in a trailer. I feel like it reveals too much. It'd be like showing that Cap is the one who picked up the hammer
Hmm.
in Infinity War,
Endgame. Yeah.
Endgame.
Here's a question for you. Did you know going in that it's Bucky?
No, I had no idea,
Mhm.
because I don't think I had like ever really read a comic book at that point.
Okay. So I'm going to tell you something very interesting over here because 6 months before the movie came out, IMDb spoiled it.
Oh, no.
And it's listed on Google when you would just search Captain America the Winter Soldier, it would say Sebastian Stan, Bucky Barnes slash the Winter Soldier. And
That's great. So, I mean, I feel like that would have had to have been on like Disney though, because don't they like send the sheets to IMDb? Like, it's not
yeah,
someone like that had to have been Marvel's mistake.
yeah. And
That's crazy.
they did not reveal the Hydra stuff though. That was a whole
Right.
surprise. So,
Like why, like how he became like why he's the Winter Soldier, like
mhm.
is he brainwashed? Didn't remember Steve, like all of that would have been a surprise. Yeah, I guess I that was the plus of me not being chronically online at the time. And I like, I was fresh out of high school, first year of college. I had other things I was worried about.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, and like Twitter wasn't the site that it was is I don't even want to say today, but like 6 years ago. Like it was a very different time.
So going into the movie itself, I mean, when once we get actually going, we've got this mission going on with Steve and Natasha. Like immediately out the gate, the stuff that's established with Shield, I found so interesting, especially with Project Insight. And there's so many things about it that, especially right now, with government surveillance and talks about watching people's
Mhm.
movements. There's this conversation that comes up about just like keeping an eye on targets before something even happens. But it's like it's not this isn't it's like Steve says, this isn't freedom, it's fear.
Thinking back to when this movie came out, that message was so powerful because like Iron Man started off with like commentary on the war on terror, but I feel like it was this film that really was the first one that like dove into like current political issues because around 2014 was when we had like the Edward Snowden like leaking like community like info on intelligent communities, especially the US intelligent communities. So for this film to start out off the bat, like you said, of like basically critiquing intelligence communities and like the military, like industrial military complex is at that time very powerful and probably a really ballsy move for Marvel.
Mhm.
And that was something that rewatching it this time, it's that was something I think I reflected on the most was just like I don't know. It just felt like it was actually taking a stance and saying something and how strong of a message this film is trying to say.
And it also does a very seamless job of like building it into the idea of Hydra being involved in all of this, behind the scenes, and making them a lot more menacing because just the idea of it. I'm gonna tie that back into First Avenger for a second because something that I
Mhm.
actually critiqued about First Avenger was I thought Hydra and stuff with the Red Skull could have been a little stronger because
Yeah.
I thought that wasn't so great. I think this movie kind of redeemed some of that. And
Yeah.
I feel like I saw the menace in it more. It's like sort of this, organization being like, destabilized from the inside. And, like the idea of our heroes are, well, not really doing the good work, not always, at least.
Or unknowingly working for someone that they don't realize they're
Hmm.
working for.
Yeah.
Or in like that moment of the senator, I can't remember his name in the film, but when he whispers like the Hail Hydra, and you're like,
Hmm.
that's like a government, that's an elected official, and
Hmm.
he's also part of Hydra, and like
Hmm.
it's this network and like
Mhm.
this web that has spread
Mhm.
throughout.
It also creates this really interesting theme of the movie, which is like, what kind of a hero do you want to be? Because Steve is someone who is sort of built on, being a good man, the righteousness of it all. And this is something that's constantly challenged in Winter Soldier, and something that comes up with Natasha as well.
My very first note that I took when I watched this
Hmm.
was because it that the beginning basically starts off with them like infiltrating the ship. Cap gets there first. And my first note was like, I was like, isn't he supposed to be like all righteous and like doesn't want to kill people? And I was like,
Hmm.
what that man who just took a shield like directly to the spine, or the guy that he kicks off the ship. I was like,
Hmm.
he's those people are not surviving. I'm
No.
pretty sure decapitates someone in the control room. Like he's like standing up and you see like Steve throw the shield and you
Hmm.
don't see it happen, but like there's not a body and then the shield is just like behind him, like embedded in the wall. And I was like, this is a very violent film.
Well, the thing about Steve not killing or killing, I think he says like pretty early on in First Avenger, he's like, I don't want to kill people. I just hate bullies. But
Yeah.
towards the ending, when he's sort of like fighting off, like when he's trying to get the missile sort of towards New York, sort of abort that. There's a guy he knocks off when he's fighting in midair and gets shredded through a propeller. So it's like, well, yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I guess I guess if it's not a good guy, but then again, that's the morality that the movie plays with, right? It's like, what's a
Yeah.
good guy? What's a bad guy? And just putting these characters in peril. Can't talk more about that without talking about the whole thing with Fury, which is this really crazy situation where he's trying to get away from basically getting pancaked and killed by the
When he's in the
cops.
car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just rewatching, I was like, this is pretty intense, like for a like a Marvel movie, like especially again coming off of something like Thor: The Dark World and stuff.
I think Samuel Jackson, like second, probably Robert Downey Jr. being casted as Iron Man, like him being casted as Fury is probably one of the greatest casting
Hmm.
decisions like ever.
Hmm.
And it was that scene where it was like that car getaway action scene where I was like, God, I wish we saw Fury in more of these types of situations. And I say that and like this is on me. I never watched Secret Invasion,
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
which I believe has him in it.
Yes, it
The
does.
sorry, the Disney Plus shows, I gave them a shot. And then I think Hawkeye was the last one I saw, and I just like I got a little worn out.
I
But
see. I see.
I've seen all the movies and stuff, and the action in this movie really is like I think it's top tier. I think it's the
Hmm.
best. The action is felt in the MCU. It
Hmm.
feels real. Like there's like stakes in every fight, and I Samuel Jackson also is extremely convincing when he's shot and like his car is he's trying to yell at his car to take off, and the car's like only the air conditioning works, and his just like exasperation. I felt that. The highway scene with like
Hmm.
Bucky against like the trio, and
Hmm.
I had forgot about that until it started. I was like, oh yeah, this
Hmm.
fucks.
That's another example of a very desperate moment, like because you just saw two of these characters, Cap and Natasha. You just saw them in the middle of New York, take on an alien army, and then just kind
Mhm.
of save the world. And yet this one Russian assassin, or well, it's Bucky, but like is coming together with an army, and yet it feels like Natasha, if she gets shot, it's like this is a problem.
Yeah,
And
it's like one
she,
of the only times she like looks afraid is
yeah,
when she's shot, or like when she every time she like when she knows it's the Winter Soldier. If you like, yeah, look
exactly.
at her face. It's the only
Hmm.
other time I think we ever see her scared is when she's with the Hulk.
One of the biggest highlights that everybody brings up is this elevator scene, which I mean, again, enough has been said that I don't know if there's anything we can add, but again, it's just another example of a great, close quarters moment with Cap just trying to get out, and there is a struggle to it, which I really like how they pulled off.
This is Steve's hallway fight scene, and it's basically what you said. It's just like it's that close quartered, and it's just proof that the choreography in this movie is
Mhm.
incredible. Like, I mean, we've talked about all the fight scenes and action sequences, and they feel real. And yeah, that elevator that elevator scene had to have been a tough one to pitch, in my opinion, because
Hmm.
how are you supposed to film a fight scene with this many people in
Hmm.
an elevator?
Yeah.
But they did it.
The one character I'm thankful for, and we're gonna get more of him very soon, I think, as well, is Falcon, Anthony Mackie, and of course now he's the new Captain America. But in this
Mhm.
movie, they did such a great job of introducing him into it, and again, back to that idea of realism. Like he's someone who is working with other ex-soldiers who are dealing with PTSD at first, and they're doing meetings, and he's just trying to help. Like he's just trying to be there for everyone as much as he can. I think they just did a very good job of making his character like seamlessly fit into Cap's story.
So I showed my other Funko Pops. I have two.
There you go.
I don't have him as Captain America, which I'm sad, but I like stopped collecting Funkos.
Yeah,
But I do love the zombie one. And then also just like the suit from one of the comic runs.
yeah, it's pretty cool.
I don't think he's been in that suit in
No,
any
no, not
action
as
figure.
yet.
But yes, I love Sam, and so he just is one of my favorite characters. But I was like really into his character when this movie came out for
Mhm,
basically like a lot of things that you just said, and how he's again like he doesn't have like superpowers, but
mhm,
he's just like so pure of heart and wants to help people, and he's that
mhm,
iconic line. He's like
I do what he does, just slower.
he is like the that Steve Rogers Captain America, and he wants to help people. We haven't really talked about, I think, like what a great character arc Natasha goes through in
mhm,
this film. This one is the one that like you just get so much background in history where she has that one line where she was like she left the KGB and she basically traded them in for Hydra when
mhm,
she felt like she was getting out.
mhm,
And this whole like she's got like red in her ledger and
mhm,
she's trying to turn a page after being made a weapon similar to the Winter Soldier, and I she is just grappling with a lot in this film, and Steve is learning to like can he trust her, and there I think there's that one scene she was like would you trust me to save your life
mhm,
basically, and he's like I'm I'm learning to, or like I do now, and you see this like moment of realization that like that just means so much to her because I don't think anybody has ever in her life trusted her. Maybe Hawkeye, but we just we didn't get a
No,
lot
we
of
didn't have a ton
insight
of
to their
fun there.
relationship. So
Since we were talking about villains being better over here, we talked about like Hydra being a greater threat in this one, like feeling like that. One thing that I constantly think about is with this movie is we had Robert Redford in the
oh
MCU,
yeah.
and
In my notes, I literally just put Robert Redford and I was like, enough said. Like
enough said.
I don't even know what else to put there. It's crazy that they got him and
Mhm.
he is perfect in that role.
Yeah, he does a great job. When I watched this movie, it really made me want to watch other Robert Redford movies.
Yeah.
So it actually led me on a binge. Like I actually started with stuff like 3 Days of the Condor and stuff like that, just to basically be like, okay,
Oh, okay.
what else do you have going on? And so much of part of that movie is in seeped into Winter Soldier. So it just
Yeah.
feels like righteous, like the right casting, where it's like, of course, for this movie, you got you got Robert Redford to play the villain.
Have you seen the Tony Scott movie? I gotta look
Spy
it up.
Game.
Spy Game.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was, I was, I was, I was, I was sort of betting on it. I was like, why do I feel like she's gonna say Spy Game? Yes, I have
I
seen.
look, Robert Redford, I mean CIA operative. I'm a huge fan of Tony Scott. Like may he
Hmm.
rest in peace. But like
Hmm.
you either love or hate Tony Scott movies, and
Hmm.
I'm in the love category.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, no, same over here. Like I grew up with a lot of Tony Scott movies thanks to my dad, especially like my dad was in the Navy, so Top Gun was a
Mm.
what like the most watched movie in my house for like all time pretty much, and so was Crimson Tide, but there was a lot of love for Tony Scott in these walls for sure.
I used to live down the street from a family video, and I like weekly would go and re-rent Man of Fire and Deja Vu, and those were my first like Denzel films and my first Tony Scott films. I hadn't even seen Top Gun, but
Oh wow.
I don't even think I realized at the time that they were both Tony Scott films,
Yeah.
but I used to rent them. I like at the end of my life, I hope I could just be like, what are some really weird statistics?
Hmm.
And I want to know how many times I rented Man of Fire and Deja Vu because it was a lot. It was
There's a
those
lot.
two and it was Girl Interrupted. For some reason, those three films raised me.
Hey, great Angelina Jolie performance, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah.
I also just like the intro to the Winter Soldier in this film
Mhm.
is like chilling. And again, I didn't realize it was Bucky. The thing that always I think stuck out with me in the intro for the Winter Soldier is the score, the sound that they use.
Mhm.
I don't know who the composer
Henry
was.
Jackman, because I want to
Thank
follow
you.
you. Yeah, I want to follow you up on that point by saying I actually think this score sometimes gets some flack. I actually remember reading up like some like people were not very happy with the score. I can't say I disagree more because I do. I think it's a really great score.
That one surprises me. I love the it's like this mechanical gritty like noise. It doesn't sound good. Like if you're just
Hmm.
listening to it because you were trying to like you want to listen to something pleasant, it's
Hmm.
not pleasant. But I think that's
No.
what makes it great. And I have listened to the Winter Soldier like theme song
Hmm.
since then because it's just like I don't know, it just puts you in an extremely uncomfortable mood. It's like the Jaws theme song. It's like the
Hmm.
Darth Vader theme song. Like to me, like I hear it and I'm like, oh my God, that's the Winter Soldier. It's not even Bucky. It's this foreboding villain that Natasha is scared of. Like people are
Hmm.
terrified of this guy, and you've just gotten like you've seen that they've fed you this terror like slowly throughout the film, and then you get to his intro, and it's in
Yeah.
that car
Yeah.
chase scene with Samuel Jackson, and he's just standing there. He doesn't even care. He's like with the
Hmm.
way he like steps out of the way of the truck that he flips over. You're like
Hmm.
that's a badass, and that's he's a great villain.
The part which I found most menacing with him is like there's an air support team towards the end of the movie, which is siding with Steve. And so there's like, okay, we're the only air support that Steve Rogers has. We need to help him out. And Bucky comes in and he wipes out the entire air support team in one shot, pretty much.
Oh,
Like,
I didn't even, I think I like missed them
yeah.
saying that, but yes, they're like on top of the carrier.
Yeah, carrier.
Yeah, and
And
he's like, this is, you guys are chump change.
yeah, he just has a grenade launcher, I think, and he just like fires a bunch of shots. He takes care of everything, throws one grenade into I forgot what the jets are called, just blows it up, hijacks another one, and just goes up to fight Steve. I was like, oh my God.
Like, not like, there's just literally no, there's no obstacle in his path that he could not
No,
overcome that
that's
you think
hmm.
when you, as you're watching this, you're like, gosh, like,
Hmm.
how are we going to do this? And at that point, I mean, you know, it's Bucky and my like last note, I was like scrolling through, it was quoting the "You're my friend, you're my mission," and I'm just like, gay.
He is
So
trying to
I
kill.
wasn't, I wasn't even like a Steve Bucky shipper,
Oh,
but I feel for them watching this
hmm.
movie because I get it. I love a villain with a tragic backstory. Anakin
Hmm.
Skywalker is one of my favorite characters to ever exist. And Bucky is right up there with
Hmm.
him as the Winter Soldier. There's just like some such great callbacks to the other
Hmm.
films and getting that callback to Bucky and his relationship with Steve, and
Hmm.
that is a great problem for a main character to have with Steve is it makes him confront that question Sam asks him on the bridge is he's like the Winter Soldier is not someone you save, he's someone you stop, and can you do that?
Hmm.
And like Steve is like he's like I don't know, he doesn't think so.
Hmm.
And he's so like headstrong and he's like I'm gonna make him remember me like even if
Hmm.
it kills me. And he doesn't say that but that's implied, and
Hmm.
we see that later on. And
There is weight to the fact that even that simple line where, after Steve's mom passes the funeral, they're, sort of going in, Bucky's like, I'm with you to the end of the line,
mhm,
and the fact that that line Steve uses in the end to snap Bucky out of the second mind wipe, I guess, because like he
yeah,
gets re-wiped after the bridge fight.
a really good like callback, like bookend moment of their beginning, and I don't want to say their end, but just like where they are now.
With all the things being said about Winter Soldier, I think at the end of the day, it's just there's a reason why in this entire conversation, as I'm sure many have been able to gather, it's remained one of the best MCU movies. It's a
Yeah,
really great character study, it's a really great action thriller, it's a really great, exploration of things with the MCU and what it could, do going forward. And it really set the standard in a lot of ways.
it's hard for me to even kind of come up with a critique for this
Mhm.
movie. I don't really have one. I
Mhm.
don't know if there's anything in this movie that I would change.
I honestly don't have anything. I think
Yeah.
the only critique I remember, like for a while there, the one critique I remember seeing from someone was that it was a few minutes longer than it needed to be. But quite frankly, I didn't feel that.
I actually had made a note that I love the script so much, and
Mhm.
I feel like the pacing it just feels like such a tight script.
Mhm.
And while I was watching, I was like I didn't feel like there was any lull,
No.
and wasn't sure like what to cut really.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for talking to me about Winter Soldier. And before I let Kaitlyn go, tell us where we can find you.
Yeah, you can find me basically on most social medias at Caitlin Redwing. I X is locked down. I've moved over to Blue Sky. I had a talk show called The Real Time Strategy on YouTube and podcasts where I talked about the video game industry at large. We just had our final episode, but there's a lot of like really great conversations there. We interviewed people in the industry, and I'm in that period of figuring out what's coming next when it comes to my filmed content. But yeah, go follow me on Blue Sky, Instagram, TikTok, and let's chat.
Let's do it. Thank you so much as always, Caitlin. It was awesome. Thank you guys so much as always for watching, and we'll see you guys at the movies.